Signs of the times, people need freedom from their troubled minds. So this rhymes for the times. It's just a reminder to show love and be kind. Just keep back.
So, contemplating hindsight is 2020 between what was probably the worst decision I made in my whole process of family court, between times of representing myself, certain arguments I made, getting the $40,000 lien for the affidavits I submitted, and I probably narrowed it down to three things. One would be telling the truth, that it was pretty detrimental to be so honest throughout the whole process. The second one was not continuing to consider sleeping with my ex, having a sexual relationship which would have appeased her and got her back to Colorado for the 6 months period time, which UCCJEA, the jurisdictional requirements, statutes, and whatnot. The 6 months, if I just did the duration of sleeping with her, that I could have had jurisdiction in Colorado, my whole future in life presumably would be very different. And the third being not fighting at all, not trying at all, not getting any lawyers, not spending any of the money, just going with the flow, pleading very simple pleas, that you're an invested, interested party, and just trying to get the maximum amount of time and responsibility, and exercise the most rights that these states will give us. So hindsight 2020, what was the worst decision I made in this whole process? Honestly has to be, at this point, everything can change, but at this point, I truly believe it's wasting time trying anything at all. Being over $100,000 in debt, 3.5 years into the system, having fought physical exhaustion and ailments and manifestations of stress, as well as the heartbreak, to, after 3.5 years, $100,000 in, and a nightmare of stress and heart agony, I have 15 days a year. So in hindsight, with my particular case, when I talk with my family, that's truly what we talk about, is that I could have spent none of the money, got 0 lawyers, and probably wound up with the same amount of time. I mean, do they give less than 2% time, less than 15 days a year? I feel like you could do the bare minimum and get that. And so by no means am I arguing that's what anybody else should do or that's what's right for other cases. Certainly here in Colorado, people have had far more positive results coming from the male side of things, where everything is not so skewed in a gynocentric manner towards the mothers. I think it's still a far cry from being fair and even, but compared to what I'm dealing with in Oregon, it's night and day. So, there's many cases. I have a good friend right now that's just dealing with a nightmare. And in his case, I think it serves him to get a lawyer and to go into the courts and fight, because if he doesn't, the risk is too great. And the ethical side of me struggles, because what I learned in my court process is that you should probably get the biggest bulldog lawyer you can get, somebody who isn't even necessarily ethical, because it's sort of like the Machiavellian prince, as I've seen in the court system. The more you're willing to do, the stronger your case is. And so what does that mean for parents that want to put themselves in the best position, that are ethical but understand what works in the family court system. These are complicated ethical questions, moral questions that we have to navigate right now on an individual basis without much guidance and insight and network of support to help you navigate in one of the hardest times of your life. So hindsight's 2020, but I probably would have expended none of the money, gotten the same railroading, and ended up where I'm at now. But had a lot of my resources back, which is really valuable. If I'd have never spent $100,000+ of my family's money, obviously you can think of what you could do that would benefit yourself, self-business, self-investment, investing, whether through stocks or otherwise, into your children's education, into tangible assets, house equity, something that works for you, not just expending to courts and lawyers and having that money disappear to never benefit your children or yourself. So in my case, unfortunately, that's the sad reality, is I wish I'd never spent any of the money and got to the same place. Because even right now, that's the reality, is I feel like we'll probably have to stop fighting because we can't afford an attorney. We can't even afford to keep going to Oregon to go to court, much less to go there to exercise parenting time to try to prove myself as some benefit to my daughter's life, which is what they expect. They expect me to travel out there to show interest, where I have no family, no culture, no ties or interest really in parenting at all. So, I just thought I would reflect and continue to speak my piece on my particular case, not to be self-indulgent or shopping for compassion or empathy or, just to have some spotlight on me, as much as my passion for starting to realize, I know in my case, it's hard to feel like I'm included in any statistics. And so where is my testament? Where are my witnesses for, besides my immediate family and community that's involved and in the know in my case? But when it comes to narcissism, when it comes to family courts, when it comes to the percentage that's going in favor of women with nothing, outside of the gender and the sex, creating a severely biased standard in American culture for family, divorce, and custody courts. Ultimately, the goal is to share my testament, share a record, be a voice for positive change, intentional change, moral and ethical integrity in the family courts, simple solutions, transparency, being able to video as a respondent or a petitioner in family court. Sometimes your family and friends and the public, it's too much to go and be there physically, and so I think that's what holds some of these judges accountable or not accountable, to allow them to make some of these decisions without feeling like any eyes are upon them or there's any true accountability from the culture that they allegedly represent. And so simple things like more transparency, videoing. The law journal I read also recommended a simple, accountable database where we know what the rulings are from every judge, that is public record, so we can get statistics quickly on, especially in this specific focus of how many rulings are going to the mothers, how many rulings are going to fathers, and what is the determining factors of those rulings. At the end of the day, that's sort of the worst sentiment we have in response to these courts. Is I just truly feel it would have been so much more ethical to just say that, to say that men don't get children, that you're wasting money to spend to get an attorney or even just to fight for the illusion of equal rights and parentage. And I think that's the problem, is there's a massive contradiction. We're claiming from the sway in history that went from allegedly children and responsibility and custody going to fathers and the males to the tender year doctrine, where then it swayed to predominantly going in favor of the females, to some common sense that would end up now, after everything we've learned in the studies of fatherless households and the negative impact that has, to bring it back to center and have some accountability for that, have some way to actually see what is happening, where the rulings are going, and then have a voice and opinion as the public on that. Right now, the public's not involved at all. These judges are allegedly representing us, and we all know people that, because of the high rate of failed families and failed relationships and failed marriages and partnerships, and the increase in family courts and criminal and civil court cases, the difficulty in maintaining communion and harmony and balance and positivity and productivity within, in this case, families, creating children, and our responsibility to each other and to our children. So I think simple solutions that one is just opening the conversation, having accountability for what the statistics are right now, what the judgments are right now. I certainly would have liked to known that that's just what we value and what the standard is in this country. I could have saved a lot of money and resources, and if it's truly in the best interest of the child, just how disappointing and sad and unfortunate to have families waste so much money in the name of lawyers and courts and family courts and discordance and bickering. The adversarial two attorneys, that by itself is unconscionable. I just think that's such a simple solution. Get rid of the two adversarial attorneys. Have one attorney. If you're going to battle in court, an attorney that is a pre-judge that represents the child in both parties. And they can do the exact same thing a hired private attorney does, which is get the facts, hear both sides, and do what a judge is doing, pre-judge. That's been my solution. Get rid of the adversarial attorney situation, especially in family courts. But anywhere money and profit is involved, and power corrupts, and that's why strict scrutiny is so important, and strict accountability for all parties. These courts, I have no privacy. They went through every aspect of my life, from the psychological exams they forced me to go through to going through all your bank records, your Social Security, back to the beginning of, from when I was 18, all my bank records and everything, I don't know how that's privacy. I don't know how that's, what is existing today acknowledges any so-called constitutional restrictions to this federal and state governments, and recognition for the individual and the privacy and the security and life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, equality, basic things. To understand that the idea of men's rights and equality is something that's become laughable in this culture was news to me, and also heartbreaking of what that means for the current status of just the heart and the compassion of America, but especially the judicial system and those with severe power and responsibility, and how they're exercising that power. And so, just to comment quick on the other worst decisions I could have made, and why this particularly, this one that, won over those that I should have probably not done anything. So for example, continuing to just have sex with my ex, and have the UCCJEA give me jurisdiction in Colorado, which was recommended to me by the first two lawyers that I had, which was astounding to me. Just playing out that was the first thing that came to their mind, which maybe I'm foolish. That's why maybe the ethics and trying to have integrity and honor, we go in and we call these judges. I try not to call them Your Honor, because I feel like that's a title that's earned, not demanded of people to give you, but given to you like chief and any other title of adornment and appreciation that a culture and a family and a society give to those who have reached that level of respect and acknowledgement. And so the irony is that acting with honor and integrity and the things that these people give themselves the title for really not only didn't serve me, but was detrimental to me. And that's why an absurd recommendation from two attorneys, which was, listen, if you just act, basically, buck up, have sex with her, front like you're going to be in a relationship with her, and do your time. In 6 months, you'll get UCCJEA, will give you jurisdiction in Colorado. You can claim that as the home state for the child, and you can be in close contact with your daughter and fight in court, at least where you live, instead of out in Oregon. And it seemed absurd to me at the time. One, as a male, as the anatomy, like to, physically have sexual intimacy with a woman, as a man, you have to be attracted to her. You have to get your dick hard. So to do that, you have to have a physical reaction. This was a woman that accused me of false domestic violence and lied about rapes and child abuse and, the craziest of the crazy. And so for me, the psychological mind warp, will I say, of, trying to hustle that and block all of that out, and even in the name of getting a positive position with your daughter, with your child, whatever the sex and gender, whatever your children is, whatever your position you are in, to even have to be in that position to consider, being intimate with somebody you don't feel intimate with. That's not what life is about. And yet, even now, I still feel foolish about that. Like, as a man, all these stereotypes of the men and the third wave feminism and how we're all dogs and worthless and run by the libido and the all dominating phallic ego, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, it is why it's not just heartbreaking, but insulting and painful and hurtful to hear this continued rhetoric about males and good men, good fathers, good men, good males, and to know, had I maybe even just been that and met the standard of that stereotype, my whole life would be different. My relationship with my daughter would be different. My 15 days would be 50% in Colorado. It would be half of the time. And so, one, that's shocking, but two, that speaks volumes on that. Above that, my worst decision was still probably fighting at all in the state of Oregon. That's how devastating it's been, and that's how much of a lack of common sense and true, just sincere, genuine compassion, ethics, family values, whatever you want to call it. I have no idea how you can rationalize 2% of time with any gendered parent who's done nothing wrong as reflecting what you view as family values. It's to me, it's child abuse. It's devastating. The removal of a parent of one of the genders unnecessarily is unconscionable and unacceptable. And that's why we trying to do my part with these videos and put my private life out there and share, and try to also contribute something to some sort of positive change and something tangible that we can do, whether legislatively, collectively, organizationally, together with like-minded people who just want to see improvement and the true best interest of the child reflected and upheld in the greater society. The third, lying, maybe the worst decision. Just being honest, blatantly honest, trying to hold authenticity and integrity with the truth, while facing somebody that has no conscience, would lie about anything. My case was extreme. This was somebody that would lie about rapes, not just claims against me, but throughout history, as I know now. Hindsight's 20/20. I've learned so much more, having gone through it, of what I believe and claim the truth to be with my specific case. But regardless, if you're facing truly a narcissist, parental alienation syndrome, a true alienator, not just your average resentful breakup, where they say, there's going to be a degree of alienation and anger and resentment and bad decision, selfishness. But true parental alienation is far more extreme than that. And that's why I agree with what I've learned about it, with that it probably associates along with a cluster B personality type, narcissism, antisocial, borderline, but something in that demographic, psychopaths, sociopaths. And, that's also why I've brought awareness and try to speak up for that. And I'm no psychologist. I just think it's important to testify, to put our accountability out there, and also be open to questions and critiques and judgments from the outside world. That's what this all is about, judgment. That's what the court decisions are about, judgment, right? So trying to be a good parent is, using your judgment, your subjective opinion on what is the best for your children, what's the best life for you and your family in a complex world. So between the lies, I still, when I talk to people that are going into family court right now, I say, it's something you have to search your heart in, about lying, being totally honest, totally transparent, because a lot of these lawyers in adversarial courts, they don't care. Their goal is to not find peaceful common ground, but to find anything they can use against you, make you look foolish and bad and wicked and negative. And that's the irony if you're truly dealing with somebody that is like that would get an adversarial attorney that's just looking to drag you through the mud, rake up, hundreds of thousands of dollars in bills, and doesn't care whatsoever about the best interest of the child, but will go to war for you and certainly hurt this person that you feel something about. So it's tough to navigate, and I certainly don't have any answers for anybody else, especially speaking generally. It's one of the worst things we can do. Like, each specific situation is so very different, and making sweeping generalizations can still be very detrimental. That's why I would never say to anybody else that the worst thing you could do is to put any energy into your case, because that's specifically with mine, and how absurd and unfortunate I feel my case is. Sleeping with somebody, the UCCJEA, I mean, what can I say? It's, besides how crazy, what a world, how unethical, and yet that's the reality. Is that if that's worth it to you to get an advantage, go get some Viagra if you're a man, and do whatever you got to do to perform and put on a front for relations, I couldn't do it, you know? But I'm paying the consequences of not doing that, because now everything I fight is in Oregon, and Oregon doesn't care about me at all as a father. And so it's equal to devastating 3.5 years being in family court in Oregon. And in hindsight, would I have done that different? I don't like to think about all the what ifs, because in a case that's so devastating, and parents, I think, that have ended up on the short end of the stick, I'm talking about good parents, not people that probably deserve to end up on the short end of the stick because of their behaviors and their decisions. But the good parents, like those ones that get to that position, I don't know, honestly, I don't know. That's what we battle with trying to understand, have hope, have faith in the system and government, in just humanity and public opinion, in our value as parents. And I would say in an epidemic of unvalued fathers specifically is how I feel. And so trying to do something positive around that, balanced with the reality of the ethics for dealing with people that would use things like the UCCJEA to their advantage. I was going to cover UCCJEA in a video by itself, so maybe I'll just cut that section because it's so shocking and so unacceptable that it deserves to be looked at and had light shined on it for how scary of a loophole this UCCJEA leaves apparently within the state. So it's still, you got to do what's ethical for you when it comes to jurisdiction, all these weird legalese, loopholes and tools and benefits and detriments that exist that most only lawyers know and only lawyers think about outside of the common sense everyday person that's pretty much knows what right and wrong is. Doesn't need a billion Black's Law dictionaries to define it through contracts and microprints and a bunch of lawyer speak. So that's it. Worst decision I made, probably investing any time into these courts, trying to get any justice, any accountability, and at the end of the day, any time with my daughter. My daughter is about 3.5 right now, and I have 15 days a year. That's crazy to me. That is not equal parenting. That is not any way you can pass down your culture, your values, your style, your preferences, your education. And I think it's a travesty that this is what's going on in family courts. I feel that it's imbalanced when it comes to the men and the fathers, and turning fathers into paychecks and turning the state into a subrogee dad, a subrogee father, Title 4D and the welfare state and the incentive to be on the welfare, and the detriment demanded by welfare to the family, by the necessity of having to remove the other parent. And so, as a father who's in a terrible position with one of my children, what can I do but try to be positive and try to offer solutions that can change it? This is on what I probably shouldn't have done, but it's still about solutions, and so that's why we're doing the videos, not to fight with each other or bifurcate each other, Willie Lynch each other, divide and conquer each other, create more tension and arguments between the sexes, the courts and the public, between us and the private or otherwise, but to try to have some sort of a meeting of the minds the best that we can, and a minimization of any violence and conflict. So try to be intentional, compassionate, intelligent, and open dialogue. I'll try to put a link to the law review, which is my go-to right now as far as positive basic solutions, as well as just a great review. It's from it's a Florida law review, just about the significantly outdatedness, and this was written in 1998, of the family courts, how outdated they are, how sexually stereotyping they are, how infantilizing to women they are, and detrimental to men. And it's just far better written than I could articulate, even from my experience in one of the worst family court situations I could imagine. So to unite around positive dialogue, articulate constructive communication that lifts us up, elevates us. Steel sharpens steel. So that's my goal. Try to have something positive to contribute to the conversation. So that's just my experience. Hope it does something for you. If not, move on. Peace and love.
It's all coming together right here now. It's all coming together right here now. It's all coming together right here. Who's that? It's love. Can you feel it coming through that? Conscious revolutionary music. Yeah, you